Hey, peace, everyone. Welcome to another broadcast of We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. Today's topic or today's reading, we're still looking at the wretched of the earth, and we're going to be reading starting at chapter 3. So everybody can prepare for that in the second half of our podcast. My name is Ikemba, a member of We Charge Colonialism, serve on the Public Relations Committee. Give opportunity for everyone else to introduce themselves.
Peace, everyone. My name is Tierney. I am the We Charge Colonialism Steering Committee Chair.
Hey everyone, my name is Frank, member of WCC. I am the chair for the Political Action Committee.
All right, thank you. And again, just want to welcome everybody. We Charge Colonialism, just in case you don't know, we're a grassroots movement seeking domestic and international recognition that African Americans are colonized in the United States and therefore must achieve self-determination of our affairs. And so, I'm happy to be here and do our weekly roundup. There's a lot going on. We'd like to begin our show just to discuss some very pertinent events to the African experience. So, Tierney, what's happening out there?
Yeah, so I'm going to cover what's going on as far as Black Lives Matter, or rather with the prominent figures in the movement. I don't know if you all saw, although I'm sure many of you have, Samaria Rice, the mother of Tamir Rice, put out a statement basically condemning the Grammy performance of Tamika Mallory and calling her and Benjamin Crump and other activists inside of the movement ambulance chasers. So I thought it was, something important to discuss, because I do think there's a culture that has been created surrounding police brutality, that you have people, you do have people who rise to prominence, sometimes from these things that are actually tragic events. And then also there is also the element of people coming in after the fact, but not necessarily staying with the community. I don't want to make it so much about Tamika Mallory, just because this is something that has been in existence for a long time. I've been seeing this since I was a kid with, whether it's Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson. So it's not just a her thing. And frankly, among other people in that movement, I do think that she has a level of authenticity that the others in that movement do not necessarily have. I mean, I always remember when people wanted her to condemn Minister Louis Farrakhan, and that was an easy thing to do because that's what every single Black person in the mainstream does. And she actually stood by her word that she was not going to. So I don't want to make her like the quintessential example of this, but she is the one that was called out. And I do think there are some things that could be said about the movement and the culture of it in general. So what are you guys' thoughts on this whole issue?
I'm thinking about this case. Like, I was listening to Samir, correct me if I'm saying it wrong, Rice speak or be interviewed in regards to this particular event that took place during the Grammys. This is what like sparked her to say what she said against them as far as being ambulance chasers. And I looked at the video at the Grammys, and I see how she could be frustrated and annoyed, because I was too. It was like it just seemed like it was I'm gonna say like
commercialized.
Yeah, commercialized, but just like the seriousness of this movement, this fight that we have, like you said, being commercialized at the Grammys. And I guess like the excuse or the pretext to do that is to raise awareness and so forth. But I don't see people like really take it, if they're really serious. Like, let's get back in the streets. Let's organize these communities. She has a rec center, and she was talking about a rec center. And, she's not seeing any resources from BLM, who just raised like $90 million and so forth. So, I think like what she's raising is serious. And I think it has a lot to do with theory as well. And so, we come in this building attempting to build like a socialist, economy. But when you're dealing with some of these people who are fighting are struggling against police brutality and so forth, like what is their particular theory? Are they looking for reform? Are they looking to like integrate to the system? So I didn't expect anything less, from these people, because they're trying to build themselves up individually, personally. And they're not part of like a real, movement for like revolution and empowering, the Black community, at least in whole and mass.
Yeah, and I did see that Tamika Mallory put out a video with my son. I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched the first part of it, but essentially she was saying that she doesn't know Samaria Rice, but that she is someone who, does dedicate herself to the struggle. I mean, you can watch the whole video yourself. No hot takes from that, honestly, but it is an issue, and I definitely agree with you. It's a real issue on a Grammy stage. You're not going to get revolution through a white supremacist institution. So that right there kind of makes you question what was the purpose of that, other than to just draw attention. Yeah, I don't know.
Just to add too, Frank, I know you may have something to say, but just quickly, I'll always go back to Fred Hampton in his video when these people were coming to him about opening up a credit union in the community, and he talks about education. He looks at the program and he's like, "Where's the education piece?" And because this goes back to the importance of theory, because you can open up a credit union, but what's going to happen without the education piece? You'll have neo-colonialism. Like, are we opening up a credit union? Are people educated? Are they going to spend their money downtown, or are they going to use that money to build the community? And so I think it's important, like, what are we doing when we organizing around police brutality or whatever the case may be? What are people's theories, political theories? Are they about revolution, or are they about reforming the system? Not going to do it through nonprofits, like.
Yeah, I think another issue with concerning to Black struggle is what we have seen over the year, time to time again, with our numbers in this country. Sometimes it's so frustrating or saddening whenever it comes to Black issue. Mostly our struggle are being discussed on the entertainment platform, and you never really see white people concern being addressed on entertainment platform. You always see it being addressed in Congress, where it need to be addressed, with swift action, really, really taken. But with Black issue, when you see it being addressed on entertainment platform, I mean, it's not really going to go nowhere, because those are the same people that pay these Black celebrity. They are the one paying them. They are the one that hire them. They are the one dictating to them, like, look, we want for your music to be, sung in certain way. If not, we're not going to sign you. If not, we're not going to produce this music. So if the music is written in such a way that will empower Black people, that have certain kind of measures in there to awaken Black people, you're not going to make that music unless you become your own producer. But they're going to tell you how you should, write that music, or how you should sing that music. So in that setting, how are you going to address Black agenda in a kind of a environment? So that's one thing we have come to struggle with, as well as we continue to bring out the issue of Black people to light.
All right, thank you for that. So I just want to encourage people to stay aware, stay updated with what's going on with Samaria Rice. She is building a rec center. She's working in the community. And this is it. We want to support, this movement. We have to support the mothers, have to support those people, grassroots organizations that's on the ground. And they don't leave. They don't leave after the cameras are gone. They're still there building. So, I see I got the order all mixed up. But Frank, after we talked about it, right? Frank, what's happening?
I'm going to talk about the president of Tanzania, where his death is kind of shocking. It's shocking because we never really heard anything about being sick. Of course, it was like a week back we heard that he was in a hospital, I think in Kenya or so. And then out of a sudden, we heard that, he's dead, which it kind of shocked us. But who was this guy? Who was really, how they call it, Magufuli? Who was really, really this individual, this icon, this king, this African hero, this Pan-Africanist? Who was this man? This man, he was a man that vowed to defeat imperialism, and due to that, he was really, really hated. He was never talked about when it comes to national media because he was not a man that seek praises from the Western world. So he was a man that was hated because he was on his road to defeating imperialism, and which of course he did in many places in Tanzania and even to Africa as large. But who was this guy? This guy was a socialist, a Pan-African, and also an African socialist. So bear in mind there is difference between an African socialist and also the European socialist. So he was not an European socialist, but he was an African socialist that divided the wealth of the nation with other how they call it citizen. So he was a man that was born in 1959, and then he was also a school teacher and a chemist. He became president in 2015, and before becoming president, he was a man that vowed to developing Tanzania, and due to that, they even named him the bulldozer, of the country. So now he was a man that most people would say he was against foreigner, but let's say he waged war, but he did not wage war against foreigner. He just stood against foreigner, exploiting the nation or the East African nation because he saw to it that it was inhumane to exploit other people, and stuff. So BBC, let me read something what BBC said here before I can go further into detail. So, okay, so Mr. Magufuli has not been on a single official visit to a Western nation. Imagine, since becoming president in 2015, he has never had a single visit to any Western nation. Since coming to power, none has he attended as president session to the United Nations General Assembly again since 2015. This is a man that have never been to any single United Nations General Assembly, which African leaders see as an opportunity to spare out their vision to a globalist audience or guardians. Now, this was the man, he was not a globalist. He did not believe in it. This was a man that showed to African people that you do not have to be endorsed by Westerner or by France, by America, or by Great Britain, or by Western media before you can become a president or before you can be an effective or an efficient leader, for Africa. So, yeah.
I gotta admit, I guess I haven't, I didn't know all this about him for real. And I'm learning more, like, going back. I mean, I definitely didn't hear too much about him, like, in the normal African news reports that I go through. The only time I started hearing about him was really whenever he took a stance in regard to COVID that obviously a lot of people, particularly in the West, disagreed with. And, a lot of people are saying that he could have been assassinated. Some people are saying he died from COVID because I think a lot of people want him to have died from COVID, to be honest, because it's like, like we told you. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that aspect either.
Yeah, I was coming across that as well. He was saying that the Chinese poisoned him. And I'm like these things. When I hear these things, I don't, I take heed to these sort of conversations that's being had, because I don't put anything past any of these imperialist governments. And despite, I know there's a lot of people saying China is good for Africa and so forth, but China has imperialist policies, and and they have a lot to benefit, from Africa and having some sort of control over the politics and the economy there. And so when you have like a head of state that's like really for the people, within the nation, like sort of like a nationalism, or in this case, someone who has socialist policies, that's looked at as a threat to imperialism and capitalism. And so, it just reminds me too, like when you were speaking, it took me back to Julius Nyerere and, Ujamaa and his principle. I don't know, are you familiar with Julius Nyerere, Frank?
Yeah, Nyerere is the father of Tanzania. He led Tanzania to independence as well. So he's the father of the African socialist.
Yeah. And so, I don't know if he was carrying on and carrying those principles on of Ujamaa, or if he was developing something new.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, exactly. Looking at John Magufuli policy, first of all, I would say yes, I would say he was carrying out the agenda of Julius Nyerere. First of all, there was a man that said he wanted country, to have its own language in Swahili. And this was a man that never spoke English to his people. When he go on a platform, he spoke in Swahili, because in fact, that was one reason too this guy was hated, because it was hard for you to just penetrate his country. It was hard for foreigner, to just come and rock propaganda in his country, to penetrate his country, because they spoke one language. So if you went there as a foreigner, nobody want to speak English to you. So, and then if you do know Swahili, you're on your own. So there was no way for you to just penetrate this man country. So he spoke in Swahili, even when he's addressing the nation. He didn't care about Osaro. He didn't care about what they would say. He addressed the people according to their language, what his people can speak.
That is something we should come across. I don't know if anyone saw Dr. Mumby. She did a broadcast about this, and she said she wanted to interview him, but her Swahili is not so good, so she didn't passed on it. So yeah, that's definitely something like rare.
Yeah, that's how we have to come at, treat these colonizing languages. We got to flip it. I think like as many of us as possible learn Swahili, learn Tree, some African language that's spoken by a large population of Africans, so we can begin to communicate, among ourselves, and they have to learn our language to be able to understand what we're talking about. Yeah, Kiswahili. I think I'm actually self-teaching, teaching myself Swahili right now. And it's an easy language to learn. But it's important. Like this is, I think this was an important article, or it's important to talk about this particular event, the passing of the president of Tanzania, because we don't know if it was an attack on him or not. But we do know that any sort of socialist or communist, or things that will be categorized or labeled as socialist or communist is going to look at as a threat to globalization, neoliberalism. And so, I think we can't just like gloss over this as, the president of Tanzania died. There's people who are saying he may have been poisoned. And so we have other leaders who are developing policies that are like antithetical to capitalism, and one of those people is Ghana's president. And so we got to be able to come to the defense of these African leaders, especially if they're on the right side of history.
I can say one more thing. I know we're about to.
Oh, go ahead.
As far as I don't like jumping on and saying so and so was assassinated necessarily. But if anyone has read the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, that people who don't go with the agenda, they have consequences. So I would say, if you want to wait for the evidence to come out, that's always good, but don't necessarily write people off for feeling that way, because a lot of times you won't know what happened. All you can do is look at the fruit.
Yeah, that's a good point too. 50 years later, they be talking about that it did happen. And we're living during this time, and it's like, what could we have done, or what could we do to prevent something like this from happening again, instead of like 50 years later, like how we read about, things that happened in Iran and uh, uh, Guatemala, and all these other places. The list goes on. El Salvador, yeah. So speaking of, people developing policies that's against the global order, President Nana Akufo-Addo, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Nana Akufo. Say that again.
Nana Akufo-Addo.
Akufo-Addo, president of Ghana. He actually, this is something that happened a year ago. He went to Switzerland, but it's been back in the news as far as the Ghana president is going to stop the export of raw cocoa beans to Switzerland, and this is a major move. They're one of the biggest, or second big. I think they are the biggest exporter of cocoa. 45% of cocoa beans that's exported comes from Ghana, and this is a major move. He's doing this to increase the added value of cocoa beans. So what he wants to do is for the Ghana cocoa farmers to be able to make more profit off of the sale of cocoa beans. And so, I think this is important. I encourage everybody to go to We Charge Colonialism website, because we have an article that's addressing the exploitation of the cocoa farmers in Ghana and the Ivory Coast. And, the article goes in detail of what's happening in the United States. Here in America, a lot of people, talk about the United States, and this talk about reparations and so forth, and how, the government of the United States owes Africans here, reparations, which is true. But the United States is also exploiting African workers in other places around the world, whether or they have their hands in the government where these kleptomaniacs or dictators come in power. These neo-colonists come in power, and the European powers are able to benefit at the expense of the African workers. And so, this is what's happening there. And kind of president, I don't know much about him. I can't say if he's a revolutionary or not, but these are some policies that makes it conducive, though. I see people saying, what y'all have to say? This is an important step, though. This is an important step, though.
I wouldn't say he's a revolutionary, but what he do, I would say sometimes he do listing. I think that's how I would put it. He do listing at times, but he's not a revolutionary. So especially, the video we came out, Tiana came out with about the cocoa some months back. I would believe that he saw this video, and I would believe that some of the cabinet member or employee saw it, and they took it to him, and he saw it necessary that, look, there's a nice video, they are on point, and he listened to it. So I wouldn't say he's a revolutionary, because you cannot be dancing with the devil there at the same time we call you a revolutionary. No, I think he's just listening.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely from my assessment, he's definitely not he's not like a complete puppet, if that makes sense. And I mean by that, I mean, like, I think that he does think I need to do things that are going to benefit people on the ground. But as Frank said, I don't think he goes against the neo-colonial system. I think, like, there's a difference between people who want to see a complete abolition of neo-colonial relationships and powers versus people who just want to see Africans be the one to benefit from those types of systems, if that makes sense. But I agree with Frank.
Yeah, I see that. I think that's going to tie into the chapter we're talking about as well. But I think, like, this.
But I don't want to say
go ahead.
fair. I think it's good, to actually see I think that was a good move to actually see people say, okay, well, you need to do right by our people. I would just be more curious to know how that actually affects people on the ground in Ghana. Like, are local producers actually benefiting from these policies, or is this just something, who's benefiting? Because there's always also been other deals that have been made by that government that I would say are very suspect, particular with their gold reserves, selling them off to companies in the West. And so I don't want to automatically assume that the people on the ground are going to benefit from this type of deal.
Yeah, I think some people will benefit from it, but going back to what you raised, there's going to be a particular sector of the population that will probably benefit more than others. Like how much will the masses of Africans benefit from this bill? But I think it does set an example of what African nations need to do because this is what these European nations, United States, these rich nations have been doing. This is colonialism, where they're importing the raw materials from African countries, manufacturing it and selling it back to them in the rest of the world. And so that's what Ghana is trying to stop, trying to prevent from continuing. And I think other nations need to do it too, because like what's happening today, they do need to, it has to be revolutionary policies, though, I will admit. So we have to go further than that. But I think, like, when we look at this conversation we had last week about the WTO, I think Frank, I know we had a conversation about the vaccines. Yeah, I think Frank spoke about this, and how these rich nations didn't want mass production in Africa of these vaccines. They were trying to protect intellectual property. And I think like this is right here is a case of Africans saying, okay, all right, this is what we need to do. Y'all relying on our raw materials. And so, we're going to manufacture it here. Y'all going to buy it manufactured from us rather than the other way around. And just the last point too is like, I think like all of us Africans everywhere have to realize what's happening now when it comes to these nations and also these companies and corporations. Because when we look in the past and we look at people like what's the Bears guy, white guy from England, the diamond guy, Cecil Rhodes, people like him and others. Like there's people that today, those same people exist. Like the Cecil Rhodes, we have those type of people today, and we need to identify them in those colonial nations. So I don't know if anybody had any last words before we transition into the book club. Are we good? All right. So, great discussion. We're going to go into Wretched of the Earth, chapter 3. So, I'll give everybody some time to get to the chapter. Also want to say,
just to let everyone know.
Say that one more time.
The link was just posted in the chat, I believe.
Okay. So the link has been posted in the chat. We're going to chapter 3, A Wretched of the Earth. Also want to say free Mumia. There's going to be a mobilization in Philadelphia today. So yeah, free Mumia Jamal. All right. So we're at the chapter that says the trials and tribulations of national consciousness. History teaches us that the anti-colonialist struggle is not automatically written from a nationalist perspective. Over a long period of time, the colonized have devoted their energy to eliminating iniquities such as forced labor, corporal punishment, unequal wages, and the restriction of political rights. The fight for democracy against man's oppression gradually emerges from a universalist, neoliberal confusion to arrive, sometimes laboriously, at a demand for nationhood. But the unpreparedness of the elite, the lack of practical ties between them and the masses, their apathy, and yes, their cowardice at the crucial moment in the struggle are the cause of tragic trials and tribulations. Instead of being the coordinated crystallization of the people's innermost aspirations, instead of being the most tangible, immediate product of popular mobilization, national consciousness is nothing but a crude, empty, fragile shell. The cracks in it explains how easy it is for young, independent countries to switch back from nation to ethnic group and from state to tribe, a regression which is terribly detrimental and prejudiced to the development of the nation and national unity. As we shall see, such shortcomings and danger derive historically from the incapacity of the national bourgeoisie in underdeveloped countries to rationalize popular praxis. In other words, their incapacity to attribute it any reason. The characteristic, virtually endemic weakness of the underdeveloped countries' national consciousness is not only the consequence of the colonized subjects' mutilation by the colonial regime, it can also be attributed to the apathy of the national bourgeoisie, its mediocrity, and its deeply cosmopolitan mentality. The national bourgeoisie, which takes over power at the end of the colonial regime, is an underdeveloped bourgeoisie. Its economic clout is practically zero, and in any case, no one commensurate with that of its metropolitan counterpart, which it intends replacing. In its willful narcissism,
Stop
the
there.
national
Yeah, stop over there.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, he talked about the national bourgeoisie. You know, when I was reading this chapter, because I was reading from the PDF, when I read that part, it kind of sank in mind that the kind of leadership we have, particularly in Africa, it refer to them actually the national bourgeoisie. Those are the kind of leadership we have on the continent. And it talked about when these colonialists were leaving the continent, they left in place people who don't really have idea about the governance system, but they took on everything and try to govern. And then in doing that, they carry on the same model as the colonialists and the same model and interest of the colonialists. And then they in turn, colonize their people. You see, so that's what's going on the continent right now, because and that also form part of being a globalist as well. So you cannot be a globalist in this phenomenon perspective. You cannot be a globalist and then at the same time you say you want to fight for your people.
Right.
It can be.
Define globalist for people who don't know.
Yes. You see, you cannot be a globalist and you want to fight for your people. And that was why I love John Magufuli, again, going back to that. He was never a globalist. That's why he never attended this UN summit. He never attended and then a meeting outside of Africa, where you see all these African leaders running, going to Japan, going to China, coming to Europe. He never did it. He said, I have the resources. I have what they want. So they should come to me. And that's what he did. They went to him and then he told them what he wanted. So that's another thing Fena was talking about in this, but you cannot be a globalist at the same time you want to fight for your people.
I don't know if you heard me, Frank. I was saying you should define globalist for people who might not know what that means. So what are we saying when we're saying you should not be supportive of globalists?
No, okay, very good. Okay, so now people may say, yeah, people may say again, globalization, run a war. You can't say you can't be part of the global. Now, you can only be part of a globalist if you are on a discussion table and if your interest for your people you represent are being recognized. If your people you represent, their interests are not being recognized on a global table, it is not a globalist, or it is not globalism. You shouldn't be part of those kind of entities. Yeah, so it's just like exploitation, right? People say exploitation is bad, right? Now, exploitation can only be bad if you exploit the national resources and then it don't benefit the people. But exploitation in a way that you use it to benefit the people is good. But you cannot, be part of a globalist, and then what you carry on the table is not in the interest of your people. That's not globalization, and that's exactly the Western form of globalization. They always want to dictate to you. So you cannot be part of a table where they dictate to you, but you cannot bring out your input. It's just like the UN summit that they had. Well, when time for all the African leaders to speak, the whole place was empty. All the other world leader wasn't there. They all walked out, right? Now, but when the other world leader was about to speak, or the Western leader was about to speak, the whole room got full. That's what John Magufuli was saying. I do not want to be part of that kind of a global agenda or globalist.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you for that.
And I think that this chapter also highlights why you have to be very intentional when you're talking about decolonization and ensuring that you're not continuing the things that were taught to us by the colonial system as being the way that we run things or the way that things look the best. And like you said, we have to intentionally disrupt these things, and you do so by not just being of the mind that we have to get rid of the colonists, but you have to be of the mind that we have to promote our own systems that actually have a benefit to our people.
Indeed. Thank you for that. So, and I want everybody to keep in mind too, what's happening. Frantz Fanon is giving us a picture of what's happening post-revolution. And so we sort of getting into the psychology of the national bourgeoisie, who, was the leadership, sort of the vanguard. But what did they do after the revolution is they end up replacing the bourgeoisie, that class, after they left. So it's still that relationship between the African working class that exists. So I just wanted to give some sort of context. So in its willful narcissism, the national bourgeoisie has lulled itself into thinking that it can supplant the metropolitan bourgeoisie to its own advantage. But independence, which literally forces it back against the wall, triggers catastrophic reactions and obliges it to send out distress signals in the direction of the former metropolis. The business elite and university graduates, who make up the most educated category of the new nation, are identifiable by their small numbers, their concentration in the capital, and their occupations as traders, landowners, and professionals. This national bourgeoisie possesses neither industrialists nor financiers. The national bourgeoisie is the underdeveloped country, and the underdeveloped countries is not geared to production, invention, creation, or work. All its energy is channeled into intermediary activities. Networking and scheming seem to be its underlining vocation. The national bourgeoisie has the psychology of a businessman, not that of a captain of industry. And it should go without saying that the rapacity of the colonists in the embargo system installed by colonialism hardly left it any choice. Under the colonial system, a bourgeoisie that accumulates capital is in the realm of the impossible. To our thinking, therefore, the historical vocation of an authentic national bourgeoisie in an underdeveloped country is to repudiate its status as bourgeois, an instrument of capital, and to become entirely subservient to the revolutionary capital which the people represent. In an underdeveloped country, the imperative duty of an authentic national bourgeoisie is to portray the vocation to which it is destined, to learn from the people and make available to them the intellectual and technical capital it culled from its time in colonial universities. We will see, unfortunately, that the national bourgeoisie often turns away from the heroic and positive path, which is both productive and just, and unabashedly opts for the anti-national and therefore abhorrent path of a conventional bourgeoisie, a bourgeoisie that is dismally and anally cynically bourgeois.
Okay. So, when I listen to this part, it's just something that we see very much nowadays. Whenever you hear people who are from the diaspora, whether they're directly continental or people who have been basically enslaved throughout the diaspora, you do see like these classes of people who their primary focus is marketing and more so not marketing, what did he say? He said networking, building business interests, building support for the system, and nothing that challenges the system. So it's very much a perverse nature, because now we don't even see the oppressor anymore, because the oppressor can hide behind this class of people and pretend that, hey, it's not me, it's them. You know, I had nothing to do with everything that's going on. It's, you know, it's you guys doing it. And so that's the perverse nature of having a bourgeoisie who looks like you. You know, some of us are so conditioned to just want to see anyone other than a white person or an Asian or whatever be inside of positions of power, that we're not understanding the numbing effect that has on our ability to fight the system that has been oppressing us.
Yeah, in adding to that, that's a very good example. Again, let me just go to Africa. You see, most of the time you always hear the Western world saying, or the imperialists saying, Africa is corrupt, Nigeria is corrupt, African leaders are corrupt. You see, and if you don't really know, the actual hand that are behind the scene, you would tend to even hate your own leaders in power. And it kind of makes sense to actually hate them, because they have been so dummy to say that, and then allow these same people who will come out to the media and say you are corrupt. But these same people will come behind the table and come and corrupt your mind, and then you agree to it and you fall in it. You see, so that's another typical example. So you will never understand the game of the imperialists, or of the capitalists, because they will come out to even say, your people are corrupt, your own people are corrupt. And our people who don't know, they agree to it that, these Western or capitalists or imperialists are saying the truth. But now, these are the same people, because the moment our African leader tend not to be corrupt, they will be hated and they will be lonely, in our governmental system. So that's another thing our people should know. The moment our leaders tend not to be corrupt, they will be alone. But it will be better for them not to be corrupt, because they will not be alone. We will be with them. That's it. Again, I will go back to John Magufuli. Look at the kind of development this man did within his country since 2015 up to present. Look at the kind of changes he has made without being endorsed by the same people, by the same capitalists, by the same Westerner, by the same media that endorse other African leaders who do nothing. You see it? So that's another thing. It's better you be loved by your people. It's better your people love you, and y'all can work together.
Yeah, I agree. Just like reading this chapter, a lot of these leaders make I'm trying to put things into historical context, and I just like look at African leaders who were educated in these colonial institutions, and a lot of the administrators of these countries were educated through these colonial institutions, and so they take over the country after independence, and it's almost as business as usual, except they become the leaders. Like it's indirect rule. Before it was direct rule, now it's indirect rule, and I feel like maybe they think that they're, it's really independence though, and they may feel like, we're an independent nation, but they're still beholden, being economically dominated by, Western nations. And, and so I don't know, like the national bourgeoisie probably, let's say, and I don't know what y'all think, but I think like they, probably were sincere in their fight for independence, but then, they find themselves still dependent on those people who control the means of production. And so
and
then it turns into like, yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
I was going to say it turns into like greed or whatever. Yeah.
No, I was going to say,
I know I got a delay.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's okay. So I was saying on the aspect of the education, I think colonial education can go one or two ways. And I'm assuming all of us have received some level of a colonial education if you've been educated in the United States, unless you've been inside of a pro-Black, African-centered school, you were given a colonial education. If you've been educated anywhere out in the world, unless you've been given a specific aspect, you've been receiving a colonial education. You could take it, I think, two ways. You know, I one thing I did notice about John Magufuli, he was actually completely educated inside of Tanzania, and that's something that a lot of people were proud of, and I think that's something that should be celebrated. The other aspect, though, you do have people who go into the colonial system, and they, because they're motivated to help their people, when they see the contradictions, they go back to their countries and kind of use the colonial law against the colonizer. So you have a lot of examples of people like Kwame Nkrumah. Like whenever he left Ghana, he went to U.S. and went to the U.S. universities, and the whole time he was there, seeing how detrimental the system was to his people. And so when he went back, he said, "We're going back to decolonize." You know, so you know, I think for those of us who are in the positions, whether you have children or whether you're actually in a university right now, receiving an education, the idea always has to be how you're going to use this oppressive system given to us as a tool for our liberation. It doesn't necessarily have to be that we're going to continue the system, but you have to be motivated by the love of your people, and that you're not going to look for self-interest, but you're going to look for collective interest and use that system against the people who have given it to you.
Hey, so, you know, I want us to do one more section, and then before we wrap up, right now we're on page 99 for all those viewing. The second paragraph. We have seen that the objective of the nationalist parties from a certain period onward is geared strictly along national lines. They mobilize the people with the slogan of independence, and anything else that is left to the future. When these parties are questioned on the economic agenda for the nation or the regime they propose to establish, they prove incapable of giving an answer because, in fact, they do not have a clue about the economy of their own country. This economy has always developed outside their control. As for the present and potential resources of their country's soil and subsoil, their knowledge is purely academic and approximate. They can only talk about them in general and abstract terms. After independence, this underdeveloped bourgeoisie, reduced in number, lacking capital, and rejecting the road to revolution, stagnates miserably. It cannot give free expression to its genius that was in the past hampered by colonial domination, or so it claims. The precariousness of its resources and the scarcity of managerial talent force it for years into an economy of cottage industries. In its inevitably highly limited perspective, the bourgeoisie's idea of national economy is one based on what we can call local products. Grandiloquent, I don't know if I'm saying that right, grandiloquent speeches are made about local crafts, unable to establish factories which would be more profitable for the country and for themselves. The bourgeoisie cloaks local artisanship and chauvinistic tenderness, which not only ties in with the new national dignity, but also ensures them substantial profits. This cult for local products, this incapacity to invent new outlets, is likewise reflected in the entrenchment of the national bourgeoisie and a type of agricultural production typical of the colonial period. You just read this last paragraph. Independence does not bring a change of direction. The same old grand nut harvest, cocoa harvest, and olive harvest. Likewise, the traffic of commodities goes unchanged. No industry is established in the country. We continue to ship raw materials. We continue to grow produce for Europe and pass for specialists of unfinished products. We still talking about this.
Yeah.
60 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, so I think just the article from earlier, we're talking about raw materials being shipped, but I'm gonna give y'all the final comments before we wrap up.
Well, go ahead, Frank.
Okay. You see, the last part that you just read it's kind of interesting. You see, a lot of time we complain about poverty in Africa, hunger in Africa, no job in Africa, no development in Africa, is because those things that need to provide our jobs, those things that need to bring food for us, we export them cheaply into the Western world. We send it to them, and then they produce it into a finished product, and then they have surplus of it. So how can we be supplying people of item, and then we become the victim of it? You see, so everything that they have that make them, it comes from us. So how can food be coming from Africa into the Western world, and then we go hungry? How can the raw material be coming from Africa into the Western world, and then we are lack of cars, we are lack of iron ore or steel ore, and these things, it comes from Africa. We lack of jewelry, but the raw material comes from Africa. You name it. We lack of clothes, but the raw material comes from Africa. And then they use it, they wear it, and then when they tie of it, then they send a finished product to Africa. So these are some of the things that Fernand is talking about in this book, that we have the material, but why are we, suffering from it? And they that don't have it, they are the one enjoying from it. They are the one, getting everything. So these are some of the things that we need to think of.
I agree, and I think, like we said, this is literally like a picture of what we see today. That's the perverse nature of neocolonialism, is that we're still having the same conversations, and yet no one who's actually in positions of power have yet to challenge the system. Some things that I noted was that when Franz Fanon said, essentially, the people speak in abstract terms about the economy, but they themselves don't even know what they're talking about. I think that's very true. When you look at things like what's with the World Trade Organization, everyone's saying, like we said earlier, globalization, this idea that the whole world can come and invest in our country. And, it's great. We're letting everyone in. We're not thinking about the fact that you're literally giving people who have already had license to come into your territory to come in and out and take what they want and then go. These are the institutions that were put in place by the colonial powers for a reason, because they have a direct benefit from them. And until we have an intentional effort to dissect, okay, is globalization good for our people? Is free trade good for our people? These things that the West has told us are good, but our people have not questioned them, because we just assume, well, if the Europeans are doing it, or if the Europeans say it's good, then that must be good. We have to have an intentional effort to question these things. And I think it's not going to come from the top, because these people are paid for. These people are already sold out to the interest of the European capitalists. But it's going to have to come from the masses of the people who are going to actually hold them accountable and say, you've told us that this policy is going to do this, that, and the third for us. We don't see any results. As Frank said, how is it possible that all of the world is exporting from Africa as far as food and different resources, and yet the people here can't even eat. A lot of people here can't eat. A lot of people here can't even get a job. So how is that possible? These are the questions that the masses have to be aware enough of the situation that they're going to actually challenge those people who are in power and hold their feet to the fire. You said this is going to do this for us. It's not doing this for us. Instead, we see all these outside foreign entities coming in and benefiting from us. So show us how this policy is actually going to actualize into a benefit to our people. And if they can't answer, then that's your clue, that's your key, that this is time for a revolutionary change to push these people out of here.
And that's what I call a summation. That's yeah. And I just want to add to that and just say that the system, when you think about colonialism, capitalism, the current social system was built on that. Going back to when Christopher Columbus came to Haiti, over 500 years ago. And so today, the same relationship is in place. Like Europe, Africa and the Americas saved Europe from its raw materials, and today it's still like living off of Africa and the Americas. Go to South America, there's raw materials that are being imported out of there as well. So even today, their lifeline is Africa and the Americas. And so That's why I commend the president of Ghana, what he did, and again, we talked about his revolutionary stance. He still got a long way to go. But I think, like you said, a great example of what other African nations need to do. And, the Pan-Africanists on the continent, those at least with revolutionary ideology, this is what they're trying to do. Put the control of Africa's resources in the hands of African people. And so just want to appreciate everybody like tuning in to We Charge Colonialism's podcast and book club. Make sure that you go to the website. Make sure that you join We Charge Colonialism, even if you're supporting financially, so we can keep the work going on. You can do that by going to the website. Also, Tierney, you want to say anything about Just Bank before we log off?
You say that one more time. I kind of didn't hear.
The Justice Bank. Is there anything you want to say about the Justice Bank before
Justice
we
Bank
log off?
initiative. Yeah, that's our mutual aid initiative, essentially, that we are going to ensure that if our people are in need of assistance because of the criminal injustice system targeting them, that we are the ones who can actually provide that. So if you are someone who is Black in the United States of America, you know that you are hunted, you know that you are sought after by the system. So this might be a mutual aid effort that you want to join in. Our dues are only $10 a month. And essentially, if you are someone who's victimized by the system, you will have the funds available. We have protocol, obviously. We don't just throw everything out, but you can find out more information about that also on our website. You can go to, I think it's the Justice Bank on our website, just find out more information about that.
All right. So again, we're here every Saturday from 10 to 11. Join this discussion, join this study, and we will see you next time. Peace.
Peace.